everyone, this is Prestige Academy's online lessons. This is Algebra 1, Class 6. Today we're going to be going over exponents, nth root, foiling, factoring, and quadratics. Alright, let's start with exponents. To review, let's give an example. 5 to the 4th power. Now what this means is we're multiplying 5 4 times. 5 times 5 is 25. 25 times 5 is 125. 125 times 5 is 625. So 5 to the 4th power is equal to 625. Let's do another quick example. 2 cubed. This is going to mean 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is going to be 8. So our answer is 8. Now, sometimes we have to solve equations with these exponents. For example, a question might say 4 to the xth power is equal to 16. Now, you can maybe do this in your head. 4 times 4 is 16, so technically this is just 2. But if it wasn't simple like that, the way we would solve this is make this side similar to this side in what they have in terms of the number. For example, if we had x to the 2nd power and x to the 2nd power, we would know that these x's are equal because they're both being multiplied by itself and they're still equal to each other. So we would say x is equal to x. Similarly, when the exponent is above the number like this, the number we don't know is the exponent. Let's say 2x to the xth power and 2 to the xth power. We would know that x is equal to x because when 2 is multiplied by that many times, it's going to equal 2 multiplied that many times. So because these two are equal, x has to equal x. Now, how can we use this idea to solve this question? And we already have 4 to the xth power, the same form as this. We are going to put 16 in the same form. Now, 16 is 2 times 8, and you can divide 8 again by 2, 4, 2, and 2. I'm taking this, now I'm dividing it and looking at its components. I see that there are 2 2's here. 2 times 2 is 4, so we have 2 4's. So 4 to the 2nd power is equal to 16. X, therefore, using this rule, is going to equal to 2. So, again, simply, if we have 4 to the xth power equals 16, we want to put 16 in a form where it's like this, 4 to the somethingth power. We know 16 is 4 to the 2nd power, so we can rewrite this as 4 to the x power is equal to 4 to the 2nd power. And then we know that x is just equal to 2, because these two numbers are the same. Now let's do a couple examples with this. 5 to the x plus 1st power is equal to 25. Now, using the same rule, we would have to put 25 in a 5 to the something's power form. We know that 5 times 5 is equal to 25. So 5 squared is equal to 25. So we can just write 5 squared instead of 25. The other side is 5x plus 1. Now we know that these two are equal to each other, so we can just write those. X plus 1 is equal to 2. And then just solve this. Minus 1 on both sides. X is equal to 1. And that's how you would do this question. All right. Now let's look at nth root. In the previous question, I showed you guys an example like this. And when we saw this, we just took the square root of it. There are going to be questions where you see, there are going to be questions where you see x cubed or x to the 5th power. And in that case, you would just do the same thing you did with the previous one. You would do the opposite to it. If it was x squared, we took the square root of it. If it's x cubed, we take the cubed root of it. If it's x to the 5th power, we take the 5th root of it. Now, how do we do this? Let's give an example. 625. And we're trying to find the 4th root of it. Now, I would start this just like we would take the square, just like what we would do when we were taking the square root. I'm just going to take 5 out. When you take 5 out, it's 125. Then take 5 out again. It's going to be 25. And take 5 out. Now, left with 5. With square root, we would just pair them. But because now it's the 4th root, with square, we make 2 groups. With 4th root, we make 4 groups. Now I only see 4 numbers, so I can make my groups like this. And whatever is in the group is going to be the answer. So our answer is 5. Let's do another example with cubed. Say 8. Let's keep it simple. 3rd root of 8. Take 2 out. 4. Take 2 out again. Left with 2. I want to make 3 groups. I have 3 numbers. 1, 2, and 3. The answer is 2, because there's nothing left over from the groups. Let's do a question where we have something left over. 4th root of 128. Let's take 2 out. We're left with 64. Take 2 out again. We're left with 32. Take 2 out. 16. Take 2 out. 8. Take 2 out. 4. And 4 is just 2 and 2. Now in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 numbers, and we are grouping by 4. Now I can make a group like this, a group like this, group like this, and group like this, and I will be left over with 3 2s. So the way I wrote my answer is I take the 2 out because I can make 2 groups. So put the 4th root sign in and just write whatever is left inside the root. Okay, in this case it's 3 2s, and we just multiply them together. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. So the answer is 2 times 4th root of 8. And that's how you would simplify this. All right, now let's go into combining radicals. We covered this a little on the previous lessons, but this is going to be both review, and we're going to do the same thing with different roots. Let's start with this question. Now the rule with combining radicals is that whatever is inside the radical needs to be the same. The radian has to be the same. This is x, this has to be x too. It doesn't matter what's outside. Now with this question, we can see that one is 12 and one is 48. So I would want to make this into 12 also. When I take 2 out, I'm left with 24. Take 2 out again, 12. So I can just take, because it's square root, this out, these two, and I'll be left with 12 inside. Now let's rewrite this. We have our radical 12 minus, this is 12 inside, and because of these two, 2 on the outside. Now the next thing we do is we look at what's outside and what's inside. Because the insides are the same, and because we made them that way, the number inside the square root is going to stay the same. It's going to stay 12. Now we have 1 square root of 12, and we're subtracting 2 square root of 12 from it. This is the same thing as saying x minus 2x if we said x was square root of 12. Now the answer in this case would be negative x. So if x is square root of 12, we can just plug that in for x, and our answer would be negative square root of 12. Let's do a more complicated example. With how we did the previous questions, we want to make these numbers, what's inside the radical, the same. So let's focus on the first term first and simplify this. Let's look at the number first, 16. When we take 2 out, it's 8. When we take 2 out again, it's 4. And when we take 2 out, we're left with 2. It's the third root of it. So we're going to group with 3s. 1, 2, 3. When we make 3 groups, each group has 2 inside, so we can carry the 2 outside, put the cubed root in. We're left with 2 inside, so let's write that in. And now we look at x to the 4th power, which means x times x times x times x. And because we're taking the third root of it, we can just group 3 of them and move them outside. And the one left stays inside. So that's how you would simplify the first term. Now let's look at the second one. We have 54 and x to the 4th power inside, and 4 as a coefficient in front. Now let's simplify 54. When we take 2 out, we're left with 27. 27 is not divisible by 2, but it is divisible by 3. When we divide 27 by 3, we get 9. That divided by 3 gives us 3. And if we make a group of 3, the group is going to have 3 in it, so we can move 3 outside. 3 times 4, we multiply the coefficient with whatever we're moving outside. 4 times 3 is going to give us 12. We can put the radical sign, third root. We're left with 2 inside, and x to the 4th power, like the previous question, is going to give us 1x on the inside and 1 outside. Now let's do the last one. 128 divided that by 2 is going to give us 64. Take 2 out, 32. Take 2 out, 16. Take 2 out, 8. Take 2 out, then 4. And 4 is just 2 times 2. And if we're making a group with 3 again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We can group 2 together to make 3 groups. And we're left with 2. 2 times 2, 2 times 2, 2 times 2. Each group is 4, so we can move 4 outside. We multiply again with the coefficient. So I just want to move everything up and rewrite what we found. The first term was 2x, third root of 2x. Second term was, let's put the signs in later. Second was 12x, third root of 2x. And the third was negative 4x, third root of 2x. All right. Now the first two are being added, so let's put the positive sign in. And these are being subtracted, so let's put the negative sign in. We learned in the previous classes that when we had 2 negative signs together, these are going to turn into a positive. So that's what happens. So if we are to add all of this, we would use the rule we learned previously. We would just add the coefficients and write what the root is down with the coefficient, because they're all the same. 2x plus 12x is going to be 14x, plus 4x is going to be 18x. And then you can just put the third root in. And there's 2x in the cube root. So this would be the answer. Factoring basically means that we're splitting whatever we're giving into smaller terms. So in order to do this, you would look at the terms you have and take out whatever they have in common. For example, in this case, I see that there's 5x and 40. 40 is divisible by 5. And when you divide it by 5, when you take 5 out, you get 8. So I can just take 5 out and say x plus 8. If you remember the distributive property, you would remember that when we have something like this, we multiply 5 first with x and then with 8. And then when you do that, you would get 5x plus 40. And that's how you can check your answer. It's the same thing. So if the question said factor 5x plus 40, you would take whatever these two numbers have in common, which is 5, outside. And when you divide 5x by 5, it's x. When you divide 40 by 5, it's 8. And that would be your answer. Now let's do the second one. 10x plus x. Now 10 and 1, which is the coefficient for x, which is invisible in this case, don't have anything in common except for 1. And if you take 1 out, that wouldn't be simplifying anything. But I see that both of them have x in them. This has 1x and this has 10x. So let's take x out. When you divide 10x by x, you're just left with 10. And when you divide x by x, it's 1. And 10 plus 1 is equal to 11 times x, so it's 11x. And that's how you would normally simplify this, but just in terms of factoring, when the numbers get harder, when this is x squared and this is x to the third power, that's how you would do it. Now with this question, we see that both have x's and both have a coefficient in front of them. Now 20 and 12, they both share 2 and they both share 4. In this case, we're going to focus on the bigger one and take 4 out. They also have x's, both of them. One is x squared, the other one is x. So we can take 4x out. When we take 4x out, 20x squared divided by 4x is going to give us 5x. And 12x divided by 4x, you can write it like this. X's are going to cross out. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So 5x plus 3. This is the simplest form of this. And for the last one, 12x plus 5, as you can see, only one of them has x, 5 doesn't. And 12 and 5 don't share a number we can divide both by, except for 1, but that wouldn't be effective. So this is the simplest form we can write this in. Now we have a little more complicated question. We have x squared plus 3x plus 2, which is a trinomial, which means there are 3 terms. Now, as you can see, the first 2 terms have an x, but the third one doesn't, so we can't take x out. The second and the third term have numbers in front of them, but they don't have anything in common, which means we can't take a number out either. So we have to use a different strategy to solve this, to factor this expression. And the way we do that is this rule. Now, this can be written as ax squared plus bx plus c. A being the coefficient of x, which in this case is 1. B being the coefficient in front of this x, which in this case is 3. And c being this number. And our answer, when we factor, is going to be in a form like this. 2 parentheses, each have an x in them, plus or minus, depending on the question, and the number. Now, in some cases, these x's have a coefficient, but because this x doesn't have any coefficient in front of them, these x's are also not going to have any coefficients. We're also going to do a question where it does have a coefficient, so in this case, just focus on this question. Let's say, for the sake of explaining it, this number is z and this number is y. The rule is, when you add these two numbers, when you add z and y together, you're supposed to get b, the coefficient of this x. But when you multiply these two numbers, you're supposed to get c. So how do we use this rule to factor this question? Now, we said that z plus y is going to equal to b. B in this case is 3. And z times y is going to equal to c, which in this case is 2. Now, what numbers do we know that when you add them together, you get 3, and when you multiply them together, you get 2? Let's look at the multiples of 2. The multiples of 2 are 1 times 2, and 2 times 1, but it's the same thing, so we can just say 1 times 2. The only multiple is 1 times 2. And 1 plus 2, when you add them together, you get 3. So we know that these numbers are 1 and 2. In order to find plus or minus, just look at the numbers. If we said this was -1 and 2, when we multiply them, you would get a negative number. But this is positive, so it's just +1 and +2. So when we write this, when we factor this, we're supposed to get x plus 1, x plus 2. This number plus this number is equal to b, and this number times this number is equal to c. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3. Now let's do this example. This is sort of a special case. Now, as you can see, we have 3x squared plus 6x minus 24. Now, we can do it the way we did the previous question, but as you can see, x has a coefficient in front of it. In this case, I also see that 6 is divisible by that coefficient, and 24 is also divisible by that coefficient. So I can just take that out and write whatever's left. When you divide 3x squared with 3, you get x squared. When you divide 6x by 3, you just divide 6 by 3 and put that x in, 2x. And when you divide -24 with 3, you get -8. So this is our more simplified form, but it's not the simplest form. We can still factor whatever is inside the parentheses. In order to do that, we use the previous rule. Our answer is going to be something like this in parentheses. X doesn't have a coefficient in front of it anymore, so this is just going to be x and x. It's going to be plus or minus, and a number. Now, that number is going to be following the same rule we did in the previous one. This times this number is going to equal to this number. This plus this is equal to this number. So we can start by finding the multiples of 8. The first multiple is, in this case, is -8, so -1 times 8, or -8 times 1, both equal to -8. It can also be -2 times 4, or -4 times 2, both also equal to -8. And these are the multiples of -8. These 4 are the possible options. Now let's look at this number. Whatever these two are, the sum of them have to equal to 2. So let's add all of these together to see if any of them equal to 4. 8 plus -1 is equal to 7, because it's the same thing as 8 minus 1. -8 plus 1 is equal to -7, because it's the same thing as 1 minus 8. 4 minus 2 is equal to 2, and -4 plus 2 is equal to -2. In this case, it's +2, so this one fits. So we just simply take those numbers, -2 and 4, and put them in. That's +4. So our answer, when we factor whatever is in the parentheses, is x minus 2 times x plus 4. And we had a 3 outside, so we just put that 3 down. And this is how you factor this question. Now let's do an example where the leading coefficient is not 1, it's in this case 3, and you can't take it out to make it 1. Now this question requires a few more steps. First, we multiply 4 and 3, which if we follow this form, plus bx plus c, are 8 times c. So we do 8 times c, which in this case is 3 times 4, and that's going to equal to 12. And then we look at b. B is 7. And we ask, what can a and c be? What are the multiples of 12 that when you add them up are equal to 7? Now the multiples of 12 are 1 times 12, 2 times 6, and 3 times 4. When you add 1 and 12 up, you get 13. When you add 2 and 6 together, you get 8. And when you add 4 and 3 together, you get 7. So the multiples we're trying to look at are 3 and 4. Now if x didn't have anything in front of it, we would just do the parentheses and put these numbers in. But in this case, because the leading coefficient is not 1, instead we use these numbers to split the middle term. Now what do I mean by that? Just write the first term again, 3x squared, and the last term, which is plus 4. But you split 7x into 2. In this case, because it's 3, it's going to be plus 3x, and because the second is 4, plus 4x. Now if you were combining like terms, these two are both x's, and when you combine them, 4 plus 3, 7, you would still get 7x. So these are the same exact thing, but you have to split it like this to do the question. After splitting it, we want to group the two. Split them and have two groups. And the two groups, whatever is inside, need to be the more similar. So in this case, I see two 3's here and they both have x's, so I'm going to make these two a group. And then for these, they both have 4's, so let's make this a group. And now you have to factor whatever's inside. I can take 3 out and I can take x out because both have 3 and an x. When I take 3x out, 3x squared divided by 3x is going to be x, plus 3x divided by 3x is just going to be 1. So this is the first one factored. Let's put the plus in, we're just carrying it down. And this factored, the only thing I can take out is 4. When I take 4 out, 4x divided by 4 is going to be x, plus 4 divided by 4 is going to be 1. Just going to erase that and write it a little more clearly. It's going to be 1. Now as you notice, these two are the same, the things in the parentheses, x plus 1 and x plus 1. Now what we can do in this case is just write that once in parentheses, make another parentheses, and inside just write whatever is left outside parentheses. In this case, 3x and plus 4, the coefficients of the parentheses. So carry the 3x inside this parentheses from there, and carry plus 4 inside from this one. And that's your answer. In parentheses, there's 3x plus 4. And in the other, we have x plus 1. Got the 1 here. And that's our answer. That's how you factor when the leading coefficient is not 1. You find what a times c is and what gives you 7 when you add them up. And you split this middle term like this, and then you just group them together and put the coefficients of the parentheses in one parentheses and get your answer. All right, now we have foiling, and this is going to be really easy once you get the hang of factoring. All right, remember in distributive property we had a number outside and two terms inside, and we just did 2 times x and 2 times 1. This is going to be very similar to that. FOIL stands for first, outside, let's shorten that with outs, inside, and last. Now let's see what that means. The first terms of these two parentheses are x and x, so we first multiply those two. X times x gives us x squared. Then we do out. The outer terms of both are x and 2. When you multiply x and 2 together, you get 2x. That's out. When you multiply the inside terms and x, you get 4 times x, which is 4x. And lastly, the last terms are 4 and 2. So 4 times 2 gives us 8. And that's the last. So when you FOIL this expression, you get this answer. Now, another way you can do this if you don't want to do the FOIL method is you can just draw your lines like this. This needs to be multiplied by this and this. And then this number is going to be multiplied by this and then this. Just like you're doing distributive property, but with both of the numbers. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. 4 times x is 4x. And 4 times 2 is 8. Now, as you can see, we have 2 x's and 1 x squared. So then, to get your final answer, you can combine like terms. X squared can't be combined with x because they're not like terms, but x's can be combined. 2x plus 4x is 6x. And we have plus 8 after it, and we have x squared before. So our final answer is going to be x squared plus 6x plus 8. And if you factor this number, you'll get this. So factoring and foiling is basically going back and forth between the same thing. There are two forms of the same thing. They mean the exact same thing if you plug in numbers. Let's plug in numbers and see what I mean by that. Let's say x was 2. If I plug 2 in here, I get 2 to the second power, which is 4. 6 times 2 is 12, and plus 8 is equal to 8 plus 12 is 20, plus 4, 24. And if I plug 2 in here, order of operations, first 2 plus 4, which is 6, and 2 plus 2, which is 4. And when you multiply them, 6 times 4, you get 24, which is the same answer. Now let's do the second one. We first multiply this x with this, x squared, x times negative 4, negative 4x, negative 3 times x, which is negative 3x, and negative 3 times negative 4, which is plus 12. And then we combine like terms, which in this case are negative 4x and negative 3x, and that gives us x squared minus 7x plus 12. Now we have two more examples. As you can see, in this case, x is a coefficient, and that doesn't change anything. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 5 is, just multiply the coefficients, 10x. 3 times x is 3x. And 5 times 3 is just 15. Combine like terms. It's going to be 2x squared. 10x plus 3x is going to give us 13x. And then just plus 15. And for this question, you wouldn't just distribute this like we did in the distributive property and say x squared minus 2 squared. If you do that, you'll get the wrong answer. Instead, for this question, you have to rewrite this as x minus 2 times x minus 2. And this is because when we have x squared, that means x times x. And in this case, x is just x minus 2. So you have to write for the first time x minus 2, and again x minus 2, and multiply them. And when we write it like that, we can just use FOIL. X times x is x squared. X times negative 2, negative 2x. Negative 2 times x, negative 2x again. And negative 2 times negative 2, which is plus 4. And when you combine like terms, you get x squared minus 4x plus 4. And that's your answer. Now let's plug a number in and check. Let's plug 2 in. When you plug 2, 2 to the second power is 4, minus 4 times 2 is 8, so negative 8, plus 4. And that is 4 plus 4 is 8, 8 minus 8 is 0. When we plug 2 in here, 2 minus 2 is 0, 0 to the anythingth power is equal to 0, so both answers match. But if we were to do it wrong and apply 2 to both and say x squared minus 2 squared, when we plug the 2 in, we would get 4. And because this is negative 2 squared, it's negative 2 times negative 2, which would be plus 4, and that would equal to 8, which is not the answer. So we have to, instead of distributing the 2, write it out like this and solve it like that by foiling. All right, let's do one last question. What happens if we have 3 different parentheses and something in front? Well, we do the exact same thing, but it's just going to take a little longer. First, let's do this part. Now we can use distributive property. 4x times x is going to give us 4x squared. 4x times negative 4 is going to give us negative 16x. And this is going to be in parentheses because this is being multiplied by the rest. And just write that down. X plus 5 and x minus 5. Now, there are 2 different things you can do now. You can either multiply these 2 and multiply that solution by this, or you can multiply these 2 and multiply the solution with x minus 5. Now let's multiply these 2 first, and then we're going to multiply the solution with this one. And to do this, we can just use foiling. X times x is going to give us x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. 5 times x is going to be plus 5x. And plus 5 times negative 5 is going to be negative 25. Now when we combine like terms, in this case negative 5x and 5x, because they both have x's, they cross out because negative 5 plus 5 is 0. So we're left with x squared minus 25. And that's being multiplied by 4x squared minus 16x. And then we can just FOIL. 4x squared times x squared is going to be 4x to the 4th power. And 4x squared times negative 25 is going to be negative 100 x squared. 16x times x squared is going to be negative 16x to the third power. And negative 16x times negative 25 is going to be positive 400x. And that is the answer to this question. If there were like terms, we would combine them, but in this case, we don't have like terms. This is x to the fourth, second, third, and x. What we can do is put them in order. You can put this negative 16x to the third power in front of negative 100x squared. You don't have to, but it just makes more sense that way. And if we get into more complicated questions and you have to do something else with the answer, that's going to be way easier. Now we are about 10 minutes past our time, so I'm just going to move the last topic, which was solving quadratics, to the next lesson. And with that, we're also going to cover graphing quadratic functions and graphing exponentials. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next lesson.